Let's talk about the flu. The flu is also known as influenza. When we hear about the flu, we hear these words, we hear these letters H and N and numbers associated with them. Our H and N stand for hemagglutinin and neuraminidase. These are protein enzymes, one that helps the virus to enter the cell, the other helps the virus to leave the cell. How flu viruses emerge and change, this happens through processes called antigenic drift and antigenic shift.
Have you ever wondered why you need a flu vaccination each year? Unlike other viruses that are relatively stable, influenza viruses are always changing. Influenza genes drift to create new viruses. This means that the infection-fighting antibodies that your body makes in response to the flu vaccine may only protect you for one flu season. After that, circulating flu strains may change and make the old vaccine ineffective. A new vaccine is needed to match the new viruses. The heart of a flu virus has 8 string-like segments called RNA. These are the genes that encode parts of the virus. Around the RNA are different proteins. The proteins involved in drift are called hemagglutinin and neuraminidase. Scientists call them HA and NA. There are 16 subtypes of HA proteins and 9 of NA. From these protein combinations, scientists name influenza A viruses. For example, an H5N1 virus contains hemagglutinin subtype 5 and neuraminidase subtype 1. If a person has been vaccinated or has a natural immunity against the virus, antibodies will attach to the HA protein, blocking it from infecting human cells and stopping the virus from spreading. Without natural immunity, or immunity provided by the correct vaccine, the HA proteins on the virus interact with sugars on the outside of those cells. This creates a bond that allows the virus to enter targeted cells where it can cause infection. When the influenza viruses replicate, they can mutate slightly. Scientists have shown that this leaves small changes in the HA and NA proteins. Over time, as the virus spreads from person to person, these changes accumulate, and the virus drifts from its original form. Eventually, the immune system no longer recognizes the HA proteins from the virus, and the flu vaccine becomes ineffective. Each year, flu vaccine is made to protect against the most common flu viruses predicted to circulate among the population. Historically, scientists have done a remarkable job of matching the vaccine to the circulating viruses. Although there is an effective vaccine, not enough people choose to get it. As a result, influenza sickens between 5 and 20% of the U.S. population each year. More than 200,000 people may be hospitalized, and up to 49,000 people may die. That is why health officials recommend flu vaccination before every flu season. Encode parts of the virus.
Antigenic drift, why we need to get a flu vaccine every year. Antigenic shift is a swap of genes that creates a virus so different that our immune system can't recognize it. These result in large changes in the viral genome, and we may not be able to defend ourselves as well as with antigenic drift. This is what people may think be happening with COVID-19. But the thing is, COVID-19 is not a flu virus, it's a coronavirus. We have a history of experience with flu viruses, but we don't have the history with COVID. So hopefully next year at this time, maybe even next semester at this time, I'll have a happier story to tell. There were 2 articles on myths that I wanted you to read. We'll talk more about number 2, why people think if they're healthy, they don't need a flu shot. Hint, you can't always tell who's vulnerable. And we'll talk about herd immunity. Some of you have already asked about that. The other article I asked you to read was 5 myths about childhood vaccines. The one I want to talk a little bit more about is the mercury in vaccines, number 2 here as well. There is mercury in some vaccines. It's called ethyl mercury. Ethyl mercury is not the same as the mercury that's found in the salmon that you're not supposed to eat. Ethyl mercury is safe. It's a preservative. Countries that don't have refrigeration, rural facilities can store vaccines for longer periods of time if they have ethyl mercury in them. Now, I want you to remember the difference between ethyl and methyl if you think about alcohol. There's ethyl alcohol and there's methyl alcohol. Ethyl alcohol, another name for vodka. Methyl alcohol, wood alcohol. You drink that, you'll go blind. So there's a big difference between that one carbon that makes it ethyl alcohol or methyl alcohol. And it's that same carbon that makes the difference between ethyl mercury and methyl mercury. Methyl mercury is dangerous, ethyl mercury is not. The other myth I'd like to go over with you is the too many too soon. Parents are afraid to give their children shots because they think that there are too many vaccines out there. There are too many things that are going to make their children sick and that their bodies can't handle it. In 1980, there were 7 vaccines that contained 15,096 antigens in them. Remember, it's the antigen that stimulates the immune response and the formation of antibodies. Over 15,000 antigens in just 7 vaccines. Since then, science now knows which pieces of the antigen are needed to cause memory cells and which pieces make you sick. And in 2017, you're able to get protection from 16 diseases with only 177 antigens. This is on Blackboard. I would like you to watch it for class. Let's have a look at some of the lengths some doctors may go to in order to get their patients to come in to get vaccinated. I'm kidding. This is not something that doctors have gone through, but maybe they should.
Canada's vaccination rates are on the decline. Despite overwhelming evidence that proves they're safe and effective, their reputation has been harmed by the 3 Ds: debunked studies, disgraced former doctors, and D-list actors. But doctors have found a way to convince skeptics to trust vaccines, disguising them as naturopathic treatments.
People will put anything in their body if they think it's natural. So rather than tell people I'm giving their kid the mumps vaccine, I just say it's apple cider vinegar. Somehow that's better.
Doctors call it the goop effect, the idea that natural means safe and endorsed by a celebrity means natural. And now doctors are co-opting it to give their patients all the benefits of modern science without the sciencey part they hate so much.
Once I realized that many parents are convinced that all doctors are in the pocket of big herd immunity, I had a choice to make. Cite peer-reviewed studies on vaccinations. Or just tell them it's a shot of good old-fashioned healing juice.
Doctors are even adopting this approach towards the rest of their practice, ensuring that people are accessing vetted medicine under the guise of unregulated nonsense.
So you're lying? Sure. But at least now I can actually treat my patients, instead of spending appointments trying to convince them not to stick wasps' nests up their vaginas.
So while the granolification of Canada's healthcare system may worry those who prefer science-based medicine, it has finally given many parents what they've always wanted: a chance to feel smarter than their doctors. For the Beaverton, I'm Marilla Wex.
The Beaverton, all new episode.
Should you get vaccinated? It's a little bit dated.
Millions of kids each year get immunized to protect against disease. Diseases like smallpox and polio now affect far fewer people because of widespread vaccination. Vaccines contain inactive viruses or bacteria that stimulate your body's B and T immune cells to produce antibodies, which then fight the disease. When enough people get immunized, vaccines produce herd immunity. When someone is sick, the disease is contained by those who've had the vaccine, preventing it from spreading further and getting to those that are most vulnerable. But if only a few people are vaccinated, the disease spreads easily through the population and outbreaks can occur. In 1998, a paper in a major medical journal proposed a link between autism and the vaccination for measles, mumps, and rubella. The popular press and some celebrities fueled anxiety about vaccinations based on this report. Some vaccinations can have side effects like soreness and fever, but autism is a complex neurobehavioral disorder that occurs with a spectrum of symptoms. A rise in prevalence may have more to do with changing diagnostic standards than other factors. In fact, over a dozen studies have failed to find any connection between autism and vaccines, and that original paper was retracted amid allegations of fraud and conflicts of interest. Yet the actions of celebrities and the media can have a lasting effect. More than half of Americans still suspect there's a link between vaccines and autism. Call it a case of herd mentality. The consequences can be serious. In Ireland, vaccinations dropped about 30%, resulting in 1,500 new cases of measles and mumps, including 3 deaths. And in the US, states with lowered vaccination rates are currently experiencing